Hello and welcome to Uncovering Our Hidden History. My name is Anna. I am a genealogist as well as a historical researcher, and I started this channel in order to have a place to be able to put out all of the findings, all the things I was finding where we've been lied to about our history, history that's been covered up, that they didn't want us to find. And so these videos I put out is probably 5 years. I started in 2020. So 5 years of research that I have found and trying to pull various pieces together in order to put the puzzle into a picture for us to see. I'm a huge proponent of that old saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And so this is why I prefer to do the presentation in a slide format, because I want to show you the pictures. I don't just want to talk at you. I don't just want to try to convince you of my opinion. I want to show you what I have found. And I hold to the principle of let everything be confirmed by 2 or more witnesses. So before I will even present a topic, I make sure that I have scoured everywhere I can scour, turned over every rock that I'm able to get 2 to 3 or more non-related sources confirming what my findings are. Non-related meaning I'm not just pulling from one source to give the information. I'm looking in multiple places. So that being said, we are going to delve into World War II today. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. But it's going to make a lot more sense to you if you go back and watch last week's video where we covered World War One. Same theme. 3 World Wars is the name, but it's specifically World War I. And today we are going to cover World War II. So I'll see you in a couple minutes. Okay, well, I hope you all are doing well and you had a great week, enjoying the sunshine. All right, so let's get started with this. We are going to do a recap from last week, just in case, just to set the stage for today's presentation. So this is the Third World War agenda. That's the name of the series, and this is part 2A. We're going to be covering World War II. Our copyright disclaimer for fair use purposes, for teaching, research. Okay, here are some highlights from part 1, from World War I. The First World War, so again, just as a refresher, we are going from Freemason, 33rd degree Freemason, Albert Pike's letter that he wrote in 1871 to Giuseppe Mazzini, outlining 3 world wars. He supposedly had a vision. So, I don't know, I'm thinking he was channeling something. Something was speaking to him. But he had a vision of 3 world wars. And again, it wasn't just that he was being, told about them. It was instruction on how to make sure that they were brought about very specifically. Each world war had a specific focus. So this is excerpt is from that letter. The First World War, which we covered last week, must be brought about in order to permit the Illuminati to overthrow the power of the czars in Russia and of making that country a fortress of atheistic communism. I think they did a pretty good job. The divergences caused by the agentur, meaning agents, of the Illuminati between the British and Germanic empires will be used to foment, or foment means to bring about, this war. At the end of the war, communism will be built and used in order to destroy the other governments and in order to weaken all religions. So the key points to World War I were the following. World War I began in the summer of 1914. So again, for context, World War I began in 1914. Albert Pike's letter was from 1871, which is just about 10 years or a little bit less after the Civil War. Okay, so that's just crazy to me. Great Britain, France, Italy, and Russia were on one side. They were the Allies. And on the opposing side was Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Turkey. Within 2 years, Germany had won the war. The German submarines, which were a surprise to the world, had swept all the convoys from the Atlantic Ocean. Great Britain stood without ammunition for her soldiers, with 1 week's food supply. After that was gone, they faced starvation. At the time, the French army had mutinied, meaning they had rebelled against their superiors and refused to obey orders because they had lost 600,000 of their young men in the defense of Verdun on the Somme. The Russian army was defecting. They didn't want to play war anymore, and they didn't like the Tsar. The Italian army had completely collapsed. Not a shot had been fired on German soil. Not one enemy soldier had crossed the border into Germany. And yet, Germany, who was winning that war, you're not going to learn about that in your history books, offered England peace terms 3 times, 3 separate occasions. Germany, Kaiser Wilhelm II offered Britain negotiated peace terms 3 times. Wilhelm II offered these negotiated peace agreements on what lawyers call a status quo ante basis, which means let's call the war off and let everything be as it was before it started. By the summer of 1916, so 2 years later, England was seriously considering that option. They had no choice. It was either accept this negotiated peace agreement that Germany was generously offering, or continue on with the war and be totally defeated and lose more soldiers and everything else. It was becoming a mess. So while that was going on, the Zionists within Germany, who represented the Zionist movement in Eastern Europe, went to the British War Cabinet and said, these would be the Zionist Jews within England, okay, who were representing the Zionists of Eastern Europe. They went to the British War Cabinet and said, you can yet win this war. You don't have to give up. You don't have to accept the negotiated peace offered to you now by Germany. You can win this war and save face if the United States will come in as your ally. So exactly how did the Zionists in America get President Wilson to involve the U.S. in the war? Well, they blackmailed him, of course. They sent Jewish attorney Samuel Untermyer, and that's a picture of him there, to the White House to pay a visit to President Wilson on March 4th, 1913, so just a few short months after he took office. couple months, 2-3 months after he took office. Untermeyer informed President Wilson that they knew all about his affair with the wife of a fellow professor when Wilson had been teaching at Princeton University. The woman, now divorced from her husband, needed money. Wilson was not wealthy and didn't have the amount of money being demanded, so Untermeyer agreed to make it all go away on the condition that President Wilson did 2 things: appoint Louis Brandeis, who was a Zionist Jew, to the Supreme Court, and number 2, get America involved in World War I in order to ensure that the Allies would win. The only way to get America into the war, however, was for Wilson to go before Congress and provide a good enough reason to involve the U.S. President Wilson fabricated a story saying that and this might be a little unclear here, it was either a U.S. ship that had been sunk or it had been a British ship with United States citizens on it. It's a little, I haven't quite been able to clarify that. But either way, they were saying that it had been sunk by German submarines. And so Congress approved this request because they considered that an act of war. Unfortunately, the whole thing was made up and fictitious, which came out later. But by then it was too late. We were already in the war. Let me pull this back a little. And I think this is the only slide I had to do that on. I ran out of room. And that's exactly how America became involved in World War I. There was absolutely no reason for that war to be America's war. The U.S. was dragged into it merely so that the Zionist Jews could obtain Palestine. And the people of the United States have never been told. We've never been taught in our schools and never knew exactly why we fought in that war. After the U.S. was dragged into the war, the Zionists went to Great Britain and they said, well, we performed our part of the agreement. Give us something in writing that shows that you are going to keep your part of the bargain to give us Palestine after you win the war. That receipt took the form of a letter worded in very cryptic language so that the world at large would not know what it was really talking about. And that letter was called the Balfour Declaration. Okay, and that's what we see over here to the right. And then that's a picture of Arthur Balfour up at the top. And it basically says, Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you, on behalf of His Majesty's government, the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the cabinet. And then it goes on. And so that's very interesting. It's written to Lord Rothschild. Okay. Again, this makes more sense. If you're new here, go back and watch last week's video on World War I because I get into much more detail. These are just the main highlights of which led us to World War II. Okay. And here is a picture of Baron Edmund James de Rothschild, excuse me, whom that letter was addressed to. Okay, well, let me just go back for a second. So, just a reminder, he started putting a ton of money into improving Palestine, like long before this. And so, I guess it started about 1924, but 1948 is when the Zionists were actually given Palestine. And so he started in about 1924 buying up land over there, and which he then later donated or gave to the state of Israel, the government, He started planting orange groves and doing improvements with the preparation of the Zionists taking Palestine, which was not theirs to have to begin with. Okay, so after the World War I was over, it says at the peace conference, the Treaty of Versailles was held, and when they were carving up Germany and parceling out Europe to all of these nations, those greedy Zionists said, well, how about Palestine for us? And they brought out the Balfour Declaration for the first time. Of course, the Germans had no knowledge of this document, and for the first time realized that they had been betrayed by the very German Jews that they had welcomed into their country, years and years and years ago with open arms, giving them, welcomed them as full citizens, enjoying the same liberties as the native German people, where they thrived there and became very, very wealthy. Okay, so that was the first part of the mandate for what was to happen in World War I. And then the second part of that was also a goal for World War I was to destroy Russia and bring about communists, to make it a atheistic, communistic country. So enter the Bolsheviks. Okay, so that's a picture on the left of the main, the top Bolshevik group, and Lenin is in the middle. And then I believe that's Stalin. I think that's Stalin on his left, and perhaps Leon Trotsky to the right of him. They are right there in the center row. And this is a quote by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and he says, and I think this sums it up pretty well. He says, you must understand the leading Bolsheviks who took over Russia were not Russians. They hated Russians. They hated Christians. Driven by ethnic hatred, they tortured and slaughtered millions of Russians without a shred of human remorse. It cannot be overstated. Bolshevism committed the greatest human slaughter of all time. The fact that most of the world is ignorant and uncaring about this enormous crime is proof that the global media is in the hands of the perpetrators. And the reason you don't hear much about this is because they don't really want you to know what the Bolsheviks did. They don't really want you to know just how dangerous communism is, right? Okay, so the purpose of communism is, as we have seen in Russia, what happened to Russia, and also in the other lands where it has been introduced, it's none other than to enslave the people. So the purpose of communism is to enslave the people in the economic, political, and social sense in order to make possible a minority rule through violence. From an international aspect, the goal cannot be clearer: to attain, by violence, world domination by an insignificant minority, which destroys the rest of humanity by means of materialism, terror, and by death if necessary, completely indifferent of whether in the process the enormous majority of the population must be murdered. They don't care. It's the end. It's all about the end goal. So, according to Maurice Pinet, who wrote The Plot Against the Church, in Part 1, Chapter 2, he says, there is absolutely no doubt that the Zionist Jews are the inventors of communism. Okay, I'm going to repeat that. The Zionist Jews, the top echelon of the pyramid, are the inventors of communism, for they have been the instigators of the dogma upon which that monstrous system is built, which at present, with absolute power, rules the greatest part of Europe and Asia, which stirs up the lands of America, and with progressive certainty floods over all Christian peoples of the world like a deadly cancerous growth, like a tumor, which steadily devours the core of the free nations without apparently an effective means of cure being found against the disease. Okay, Karl Heinrich Marx was a German Jew whose real name was Kissel Mordecai. He was born in Trier, Rhineland, son of a Jewish lawyer. Marx published, along with the Jew Friedrich Engels, in the year 1848, the Communist Manifesto in London. Other prominent communist Jews were Ferdinand Lassalle, Edward Bernstein, Jacob Lastra, Max Hirsch, Edgar Loning, Warschauer, Schatz, and David Ricardo, all Jews and writers of theoretical communism. Okay. So, Jewish involvement in Russian communism. What country do you suppose had the largest Jewish population in 1910? The country with the largest Jewish population in 1910 was the Russian Empire. And so you can read those again if you want. That we have that in the video last week. By the way, you guys, please, you're welcome to take screenshots of these slides for your own portfolio, your own research files and things, or to share with others, please. And please share the video. Share the video to people that you think would benefit from this information. Okay, now again, I found this interesting. This was on Reddit when I looked, and someone had posted Lenin was sent by the Germans to undermine the Russian Empire. And I thought, that's very interesting. Lenin was sent by the Germans to undermine the Russian Empire. And so this person posted, was asking a question about it. She didn't really understand what that had to do with Russia and Germans and all that. And somebody answered her and said, evidence suggests that German financiers did, in fact, secretly fund Lenin and his circle. As the train left the station, Lenin reached out the window to bid farewell to a friend. He said, either we'll be swinging from the gallows in 3 months, or we will be in power. Okay, so there seems to, we'll get to that in a minute. So I said, notice that I've bolded and underlined German financiers from the Reddit post. So who do you suppose those German financiers were? Financier is another word for money lender and or banker. Who did we just learn last week that were the very, very wealthy bankers in Germany, the movers and the shakers? They were the following Zionist Jews. And there's more, but these seem to be the main out there guys. Walter Rathenau, Gerson von Bleichroder, and all 5 of the Warburg brothers. So 2 of them came to America, 2 or 3 of them came to America, and the rest stayed in Germany. And of course, the one that always stays in the shadows, pulling the strings, I would say the Rothschilds probably have the most money of all. But they prefer to work more covertly using agents. So again, Mr. Maurice Panay writes in his book, in the year 1918, Germany was showplace of a communist Jewish directed revolution. The Red Councils of the Republic of Munich was Jewish, as its instigators prove. And he says Liebknecht, Rosa Luxemburg, Kurt Eisner, and many others. with the fall of the monarchy, the Zionist Jews gained control of the country and the German government. With ministers of state, Haas and Landsberg also appear, Kotzky, Kohn, and Hersfeld. The finance minister was likewise a Zionist Jew and had his racial fellow Bernstein as assistant, and the minister of the interior, likewise a Jew, sought the collaboration of his racial brother, Dr. Freund, who helped him in his work. Kurt Eisner, the president of the Bavarian Council's Republic, remember Bavaria is where Adam Weishaupt and the Rothschilds started the Illuminati originally. So Kurt Eisner, president of the Bavarian Council's Republic, was the instigator of the Bolshevist Revolution in Munich. He's, quote unquote, 11 little men made the revolution, said Kurt Eisner, in the intoxication of triumph to his colleague, the minister Auer. It is no more right to preserve the unforgettable memory of these little men, who were in fact the Jews, Max Lowenberg, Dr. Kurt Rosenfeld, Gaspar Wollheim, Max Rothschild, Karl Arnold, I'm not sure if that was a mistake, Arnold Cranold, Rosenheck, Birnbaum, Rees, and Kaiser. These 10 men, with Kurt Eisner van Israelowitsch, led the presidency of the Revolutionary Court of Germany. All 11 were Freemasons, of course, and belonged to the secret lodge N degree, or N, I'm not sure what that degree symbol means, which had its seat in Munich at number 51 Breinerstrasse. So it looks like all of this was planned within Germany by all of these Zionist Jews. Okay, so that was a recap of the first world, what we learned last week in World War I, and we're going to now jump into what happened to cause World War II. Okay, again, from Albert Pike's letter, Giuseppe Mazzini on the left, Albert Pike on the right in that picture. The Second World War must be fomented, brought about, by taking advantage of the differences between the fascists and the political Zionists. So pay attention specifically to what I highlight in yellow, because that's going to be the focus. This war must be brought about so that Nazism is destroyed and that political Zionism be strong enough to institute a sovereign state of Israel and Palestine. And then we'll cover the rest of that after we talk about what happened to destroy Nazism. World War II was caused by a complex web of factors, primarily stemming from the aftermath of World War I. Key contributing factors included the Treaty of Versailles, where harsh terms were imposed on Germany after World War I, including territorial losses, economic reparations, and military restrictions. This created resentment and instability, fostering a climate for extremist ideologies like Nazism to flourish. The rise of The rise of fascist regimes in Italy and Germany, and militarist governments in Japan, fueled aggressive expansionist policies and a desire for territorial conquest. The Great Depression of the 1930s exacerbated economic hardship and political instability across the globe, contributing to social unrest and creating fertile ground for extremist movements promising solutions. that's what they do, remember? They create the problem, and then when everybody outcries, help us, somebody save us, they then sweep in with their solution, right? I think that's called the Hegelian dialect, I think is what that's called, if I'm remembering. The League of Nations, which, remember, that was the precursor to the now United Nations that we have, with the United Nations being the one world government. So the League of Nations was the precursor, and it was established to prevent future wars, supposedly, and it proved ineffective in resolving international disputes and maintaining peace, particularly in the face of aggressive actions by the Axis powers. Germany's invasion of Poland, okay, that was huge, on September 1st, 1939, finally triggered declarations of war by Britain and France, marking the official beginning of World War II. So let's look at that again. Germany's invasion of Poland on September the 1st, 1939, triggered declarations of war by Britain and France, and it marked the official beginning to World War II. So when I was searching for, just doing Google searches, why did Germany invade Poland? Because I wanted to know why. There had to be a reason why. All of this hate stuff came up. But I happen to know that Poland was torturing and killing German citizens, and so that's what I was looking for, was more information to that. And what I found is they won't talk about that. You won't find any information, and AI will be happy to inform you about, putting everything back on Germany. So I found that interesting. So all of the internet search engines will be more than happy to tell you all about how Germany invaded Poland in 1939. But you, the researcher, will have a very hard time finding out why. What was the reason that Germany invaded Poland in the first place? Violence in the German-Polish borders regions preceded Hitler invading Poland. There had been fighting in Silesia between Polish nationalists and German Freikorps units following the collapse of the German Empire in 1918, right after World War I ended. Okay, the German minority that ended up behind the Polish border following the Versailles Treaty had been subject to what some people deemed harsh treatment. Now, that's an understatement. Basically, after World War I ended, after the Treaty of Versailles basically completely neutered Germany, and Germany had to give up regions of its territory, and part of that territory went to Poland. Okay, and so there were German citizens living in those areas, and that became Poland, that came under Poland's jurisdiction. And there was a lot of fighting and just, unrest taking place. So let's find out more what happened. So I found this book. It's called The Polish Atrocities Against the German Minority in Poland. And this is on Internet Archive. You can see down at the bottom, if you go to archive.org and you put the title of that book in, and then the author is Hans, I'm not going to be able to pronounce that. Anyway, the author's name is on there, and so that's how you'll know you have the right document. So he wrote about this. And again, I was doing all kinds of internet searches, and you'll not get anywhere. Which is why I went to archive.org to see what I could find there. And that's when I found this book. So the author says on pages 9 to 10, so he lists his sources of information and explanations. He says the statement of the acts of atrocity committed on minority Germans in Poland is based on the following documentary evidence: the penal records of the special courts of justice in Bromberg and Posen, the investigation files of the special police commissions, the testimony of the medico-legal experts of the health inspection department of the military high command, and the original records of the military commission attached to military high command for the investigation of breaches of international law. The documentary evidence concerning the individual cases of atrocity has been taken from the aforementioned files. Okay, and so we don't want to be here all day. I don't want to read every little bit. So please take screenshots of these so that you can read them, make them bigger on your computer and read them your own by yourself. He says on pages 9-10, the records have been supplemented by accounts of personal experiences by individuals of the German minority that were arrested, ill-treated, and abducted, as well as by photographs of numerous atrocities on minority Germans as perpetrated by the soldiers of the Polish army and also by Polish civilians, such as murders, mutilations, and arson. The photographs are genuine copies of snapshots taken of actual victims, either beaten to death, shot dead, or mutilated, and taken on the spot where the victims were found and the crimes committed. Any pictures that could not be considered definitely authentic were rejected and not included in the collection. Okay. So the German-Polish situation up to the outbreak of war. Europe was relieved to hear of the German-Polish agreement on January 26, 1934. The realistic peace determination of Adolf Hitler, together with the true sense of statesmanship of Marshal Pilsudski, had found common ground in the mutual desire to establish a new state of political relationship by direct contact between Germany and Poland. The basic idea being to ensure the maintenance and security of a lasting peace between the two countries. It was realized by all those who saw in the latent tension between Germany and Poland an immediate danger to the peace of Europe, that such a constructive cooperation of the two statesmen must be of interest to the whole of Europe. It was the most earnest desire of Germany and Poland to follow up the first declaration of a 10-year pact by the development of sincere friendly relations. Such a friendship based on peaceful development would have left the door open for a friendly and acceptable settlement of all outstanding questions between the two neighboring countries. There was no doubt that problems, as yet not settled, did exist between the two countries. It was quite clear that the conditions and boundaries imposed on Germany by the Treaty of Versailles were for any length of time impossible and unacceptable. It depended on the honesty of purpose of Poland as to how far an arrangement of a closer understanding between the two countries could fulfill the sincere hopes of Germany and of all peace-loving friends. At the time already, certain definite forces abroad, aka international Zionists, were actively trying to disturb the work of conciliation between Germany and Poland. The opponents of the Third Reich were not in the least interested in a relaxation of the tension between Germany and Poland. In fact, they were secretly and openly fanning the ever-glowing fires of propaganda in Poland and directed against Germany and everything German. The change of course in policy, both in Berlin and Warsaw, in no way suited their plans. They didn't want peace between these two countries. Okay? They had another plan. Apart from this, a reconciliation of Poland with her neighbor did not represent the aims of the supporters of the Treaty of Versailles, who intended that Poland should remain in a state of permanent opposition to Germany, and that she should remain as an active instrument in the encirclement policy against the Reich. So it just goes on to talk about the different things that they were doing to stir up trouble, anti-German activity among Polish officials and military circles. They were stirring the civilians up. And it says the continued efforts of the government of the Reich with a view to persuading those in Warsaw responsible for the creation of public opinion to act in accord with, the German-Polish press agreement. They wanted them to uphold that and to keep pressing for peace, and to arrive at an effective moral disarmament within the spirit and general lines of the agreement of understanding. So Hitler was really wanting peace. He wanted peace, not aggression. But it says, the author goes on to say, since the days of Versailles, the political situation between Germany and Poland had never calmed down. Of course, especially when you've got the instigators behind the scenes who keep trying to blow the embers into a full-fledged fire, that doesn't help either. On the contrary, the systematic deprival of the right of the German element, long established in former Prussian provinces, remained such a dead weight on the German-Polish relations that the greater part of the world's opinion was always skeptical of the success of this agreement. Let me see if we can go down. Yep. So again, you guys can read that on your own. And here is a newspaper article. It looks like from the Daily Mirror, talking about Hitler's "let's be friends" plea to the world. He doesn't want another war. He doesn't want to go to war with Poland. They've had a 10-year peace agreement that's, it's been a little rocky, but it's worked, and he wants that to continue. But again, there's these international Zionists and others who don't want there to be peace, okay? And so it just escalates and escalates. But I want to be clear, Hitler was not the aggressor, okay? Not initially. Even in the spring of 1939, it became quite clear that the change in Poland's foreign policy was being definitely advanced and guided by two forces: Polish public opinion, influenced by the government's toleration of anti-German propaganda. So the government was allowing there to be anti-German propaganda, and they weren't stopping it. Was imbued with unparalleled feeling of hatred against everything German. Any statement of expression pertaining to the daily life of the German minority that was living there was considered a hostile act against the Polish state, and in consequence, the extermination of everything of German origin was put forward as if it were a national duty. It was evident that the restraint of the German government towards this degeneration of hatred towards their minority Germans in Poland was regarded by the Polish authorities as an expression of weakness on Hitler's part. So they viewed Hitler's striving for peace as a weakness, which just made them all the more bold. This fateful error was the underlying motive for the vehement attacks on Germany, which expressed themselves in impassioned demands for the annexation of German territory. So now Poland is wanting to annex Germany. The Polish government gave a free hand to the perpetrators of such bellicose demonstration of annexation, as well as to the miscreants of acts of violence against the German minority citizens in those western provinces, who were in their turn aided and abetted by the provincial authorities. The responsibility for this feverish atmosphere was hereby placed on the shoulders of the Polish government. It's their fault. It's absolutely, the blame is laid there. So this finally resulted in moral chaos in towns and in the country, accompanied by indiscriminate murders of thousands of defenseless and innocent minority Germans by Polish soldiers and armed civilians. It's like just chaos, like the wild, wild west. No one's being held accountable, and it's actually being encouraged. So the question arose as to how the Polish government could allow such a dangerous sentiment to develop in the country, and to such an extent as to permit her own citizens of German origin to be surrendered, like lambs led to the slaughter, to the lowest class of Polish degenerates, whose very lust for murder made them ignore constitution, law, morality, and humaneness. Furthermore, how could responsible Polish rulers allow themselves to be maneuvered deeper and deeper into a condition of irreparable tension with Germany without accounting, without any accountability? And so what I want you to look at here, this is a map showing the Jewish communities before the Nazis' rise to power. Okay. I'm not quite sure what year that is, but probably 30 before 1939. So look where I've circled and have the red arrows. The largest Jewish communities are in, by large, Poland and the Soviet Union, and then Germany. Okay, so what this means is you have Jewish Zionists in these countries, especially Poland. That is a large number of Jewish Zionists in Poland. And then you've got their, to a lesser degree, they've got their people within Germany itself, which are being, not in Germany's interest either. So that gives you an idea kind of what's going on. Okay, so I do want to say right here, this is a warning. The following slides are very disturbing and should be viewed by children should not be viewed by children under the age of 16. Okay, so again, I don't have a lot of them, but I do have some pictures of some of the Polish atrocities that were committed, because I'm providing you proof. A picture is worth 1,000 words. But at the same time, I do not want to traumatize anyone either. So again, if you are a sensitive soul and are easily upset by these things, then you might just want to fast forward through the next couple slides, okay? But this gives you time to remove any children that might be watching or near you. Okay, so these are eyewitness accounts, people giving accounts of what happened in their areas. It says, during the last days of August 1939, Germans were openly menaced in villages with the expressions, slaughter them off. Okay, and the next couple come from, it says the murder of Sieg, and the SD something Bromberg. A perpetual state of anxiety. So these are the minority German citizens recounting what happened. A perpetual state of anxiety reigned as no one was any longer sure of his life. The whole night so we don't know if this is, I'm not sure if this is Polish civilians or if it's soldiers or a mixture of both. It says the whole night they slunk around the house, and this furtive slinking, the proximity of a permanent danger, was very difficult to endure. This is how the rector's wife, so a pastor's wife, Frau Lawson of Bromberg, characterizes the heavily laden atmosphere of ill boding just prior to the Blood Sunday event in Bromberg. The 32-year-old minority German, Gerhard Grieger, expresses himself similarly shortly before he was beastily murdered. I have a terrible feeling as though I am being perpetually watched and think it would be the best thing to clear out. Then again, the witness, the retired witness, Judge Kleben of Bromberg, confirms that everywhere they slunk around and watched us. And this was told in the criminal proceedings, and then it gives the source there. And then another witness said, how tragic is the case of Vicar Reeder of Mogilno, who at the time of his order for internment was on holiday, so that he had ample opportunity for flight. In spite of this, he obeyed the order so as to be together with the members of his parish and his co-interns during the days of trouble. So I think that's the Blood Sunday. He was shot down with a pistol by the commandant of the railway station of Grodno, and after receiving several blows with the butt of a rifle, he was given the coup de grace by Polish military guard. So I'm not sure what that is. Although mainly men of military age, especially between the ages of 16 and 25, were killed, later on even German women and girls were not spared, and for weeks after these sordid events, death notices in the Deutsche Rundschau in Bromberg, as well as in the Posner Tagblatt, give an appalling survey of how German men, women, old men, cripples, invalids, and children were done to death at the murderous hands of the Polish people, and how most of them were mutilated in a ghastly way and robbed. So the Polish civilians and soldiers weren't just killing, they were then mutilating the corpses, or sometimes torturing beforehand before they then killed them. The type of injury, such as shots in the neck, stabs in the eye sockets, crushing of skulls with rifle butts, and exposing of the brain, shots in the head fired straight down, etc., is singularly uniform in all the different localities where murder took place. A definite conclusion could be formed from the uniformity of time and method in which these outrages were committed against the German minority, that the organization of bloodshed among Germans was carried out in a uniform manner. In any case, the conclusion arrived at the medico-legal experts, resulting from the examination of hundreds of murder cases, is that there is a remarkable similarity in the type of injury. And here are, trust me, these were the less gruesome of the pictures I looked at. Very disturbing. So even as disturbing as these are, they are the most tame. Let me just put it that way. So that, my friends, is why Hitler attacked Poland, which his attacking Poland instigated the start of World War II. So, but I mean, you can try and see, but I searched using several browsers to try to get information why Poland was attacking German minority citizens, and I couldn't find anything. It's like if they were there, it would be deeply buried. What kept coming up is Germany's aggression against Poland. So do you see how they spin a certain narrative? But again, the Zionists, it shouldn't surprise us, because the Zionists own all the newspapers. They own all of the television stations. They own the news agencies that you listen to, that we all listen to in our car. They can put out a narrative that they want put out, or they can completely dismiss or hide other information that they don't want out there. So this is a newspaper that was a picture of a newspaper from the Baltimore News Post. Hitler opens war bombs against Polish cities. Britain, France mobilize as Poland calls for aid. So do you see how they spin it? This is a similar thing happening in the Middle East right now with the state of Israel. Okay, so look how they make Germany sound. Hitler opens war, bombs Polish cities. Like, oh, he's so evil, right? Not saying anything about, he kept extending the olive branch, wanting peace, trying to keep this peace agreement that has been tentative for 10 years, trying to keep it going. So much so that Poland's leaders and military assumed him weak, trying to have peace at any cost, until he had to defend and have retribution for his citizens in the Polish territories that were having these atrocities done. And so once he retaliates, then, there's this brouhaha going, right? Poland calls for aid. It's just evil, y'all. It's so evil. So that is going to be the end of the slides, but I do have a video I want you to watch that kind of encapsulates this, I think, a little bit better, and will just help drive home these points a little bit better, especially it's regarding the what Poland was doing to the German citizens and the start of that war. So I just want to give you one more different source that confirms everything I just told you. So we'll go ahead and play that.
In 1918, immediately after World War I, Poland, which had been granted large areas of German territory by the Treaty of Versailles, built the first 2 European concentration camps in the former German territory of Posen. They immediately imprisoned 16,000 Germans. In the next 8 years, the Poles built another half-dozen camps, imprisoning more than 50,000 Germans and thousands of Ukrainians. The German Foreign Office even brought out a book entitled Documented Polish Atrocities, showing dozens of graphic photographs of the victims. This book has since been removed from sale. But it was a full-scale slaughter of German citizens in 1939 when Polish militia murdered 5,500 German men, women and children in the village of Bromberg that forced Hitler to send in his troops to protect his citizens, and which gave France and Great Britain the excuse to declare full-out war against Germany.
Okay, well, that is all I have for you guys in this video. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for spending your time with me watching these videos. Thank you for sharing them with other people. I really appreciate the support and getting the information out there. And again, this topic is so big that so this is 2A. We're doing World War II, and this is going to be part A. And then in the next video we do, it's going to be 2B, and we're going to talk more about the H word. I don't want to say it because I don't want to get myself in YouTube timeout. So we're going to talk about the H event and what was really going on with the camps and everything else that we've been taught. So we're going to cover that in the next video, and I will show you what I have found. So I hope you all have a wonderful week. Stay well and take care. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.